And now it is my pleasure to turn the service over to our speaker today, Beckee Simmers-Garris of the Catawba Nation. She is the granddaughter and the great-granddaughter of a Catawba chief. So we are so honored to have you here to speak and share with us today. Thank you.
Well, hello. Thank you for inviting me. I don't normally, even when I go to other places to speak, I let spirit lead me to what I need to say. So what I'd like to do is just start off with a prayer in the Catawba language. But don't worry, I'll give you the translations of it. Wahire, Niyang, Atkure, Harire, Kuri Taide, Akpe Akwan Hiade, Ye Rubienche Imi Chure. And what I said was, He who never dies, bless the people that are gathered here, that we may come together to learn and to make good things happen between us, and allowing no evil spirits to enter here, such as envy, jealousy, hatred, even sometimes even not even liking ourselves. That's an evil spirit that we all need to get rid of, because we were created for reasons, and that is to do good things for each other. And like the young lady that's just moving, she was afraid, but look how brave she was. And that's not part of the prayer. I'm just adding this to it. That how brave she was to get out of a situation that could have gotten worse, not only for her, but for her girls. So I applaud you. I admire you, and may many blessings come to you for that brave move. And it also says, make good things and many blessings to come to us all. Hello and amen. Well, as you know, with my introduction, that I am Catawba. I grew up on the reservation, married, and then came back after a divorce. And then that's when I really became involved in my culture. From learning how to make the pottery, beginning to learn the language. And we didn't even have a written language until 1999. There were researchers, curious people that have come to the reservation even from the 1700s. And because we didn't have a written language, of course, they couldn't write down what we were saying. So they wrote it down in their language, using their alphabet. And a lot of times they wrote it down phonetically. So, like I said, when we had our first dictionary in 1999, it wasn't until I was in Florida 5 years ago that it dawned on me that we weren't really teaching it as a language. We were more or less teaching it as a question asking. Even though we did start teaching it to our Head Start kids, there wasn't an opportunity to teach it anywhere else, because the Head Start kids were on the reservation, and once they left the reservation to go to schools, there was no opportunity until 2 years ago, when there was a teacher at Castle Heights middle school in Rock Hill, that's not native, that decided to have meetings in the mornings for the Catawba kids so that they could start learning about. And he was learning too, because he didn't know a lot of stuff. So when I was in Florida, and it dawned on me when I was looking at some of the research papers that others had done, and like I said, they had to write it down phonetically. And sometimes we always get that aha moment. And that's when I started adding the phonetics to our dictionary. We got a small grant this year to where hopefully in December we will be able to publish our part of it. And it's going to be more like a primer so that people will know how to say the words, because in any language, first thing you have to do is learn the alphabet. And in our language, we have no F's, L's, O's, Z's, or X's. But our alphabet, not alphabet, I'm sorry, our vowels, we have 4 distinct vowels, but each one of them have 4 distinct different sounds to it. So we incorporated the international alphabet so that we could get those specific letters. Just like Kina, it has that accent mark on top of her E, so you know you had to, we have that in our language too, so. But the main thing is, what a lot of people don't know is we had 50 Catawba warriors that served under General George Washington. We had 25 Catawbas who served in the Revolutionary War. Unfortunately, they served for the South because we're in the South, plus we were told that we would get a lot of rights by helping them. We're still waiting on them.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And not sure how many people know, but there are more Native Americans that volunteer for the service, even before they were citizens. The United States did not grant us, not that we asked for it, citizenship until 1924. That's all natives in the United States. And it turned out they did that so they wouldn't have to honor the treaties. If we're a citizen, they don't owe us anything. South Carolina didn't give us citizenship until 1943. And it was still illegal in South Carolina until 1960 to even marry an Indian. And that's why you have a lot of cousins married to cousins before that. And even though there was interracial marriages, they had to either go out of the state or out of the county to get married. I had an aunt that wanted to get married to believe it or not, to a gentleman from Florida that was not native. And she went to the magistrate here in Rock Hill to get married. Unfortunately, she knew who my aunt was and she refused to marry him. And it wasn't that she was anti-Catawba. She was just so strict at following the laws that she couldn't do it. But she's also kind enough to tell my aunt how she could do it. You know, back then, you could go to the drugstore and buy a blank ID card and fill it out yourself, and it was honored. So that's what they did. And then they went into Chester County to get married. It's placed on my heart. I don't do this normally, but I have to say a poem that I had written back 20 years ago. Because we all have this, when people find out that you're a native, they still go by the color of your skin, deciding whether you are or you aren't. And I had 2 women come to our culture center. And ladies, we know when we go to a religious retreat, we have that glow about us. They came in and they wanted to know if I was an Indian. And I said, yes. And then she wanted to know if I was a Christian. And I said, yes. She said, well, let me ask you a question. How can you be a Christian and still practice your culture? And she was very serious. And I said, ma'am, I cannot dishonor my God by not being who he created me to be. And then they left. I don't know if they left because they didn't believe me or they left out of embarrassment. I'll never know. But that's on her. It's not on me to decide how she felt and why she felt it. And I'll get to the poem in a minute because my mind is racing about all these other things that happened. I was at the Columbia Museum of Art about a month ago. And I was asked to be a speaker, talk about the language, and they wanted me to do storytelling, which I did. And after it was over with, and why is it always women that ask questions? Men don't ask questions. She didn't actually ask a question. She made a comment. And she said, I enjoyed what you were saying, but I'm shocked you have a Southern accent. And I looked at her and I said, you've been watching too many Western movies, haven't you? And she said, I believe I have. And we're always asked if we're full blood or if we are a full Indian. My comment to the first one is, depends on whether I've eaten yet or not. And also, I usually say no because I haven't donated a pint of blood to Red Cross this week. So now I'll get to my poem. Funny you don't look at, it's what you said to me when you asked me if I'm an Indian, as if I'm just pretending to be. No, I don't look like the TV Indians or the tribes you meet out west. Because I'm not a full blood, you think that makes me less than the rest. Yes, I have a white father and a Catawba mother, but it's what's in my heart that makes me embrace the latter without denying the other. Sorry I'm not who you expected or exactly what you thought you see, because funny, I do look for that proud Catawba reflected in the mirror is me. And I don't know how much time I have to talk, but I'm also part of my responsibilities for the tribe. And I don't normally tell this part because people who need to know will know. But for some reason, there's somebody in this group that needs to know. I'm also my tribe's spiritual healer. I'm not a medicine woman. That's totally different thing entirely. And when we have reburials, I'm the one that does them. We reburied 90 remains 6 months ago.
Oh.
And it was not all human remains, but it was things that were found with them. And we don't ever keep anything. It goes back with, we couldn't put them back where they came from because we've been fighting for 20 years to get them back. Some of the information was lost of where they were from. Some of them came out of museums. Some of them came out of private collections.
Mm-hmm.
But to do that is so emotionally draining to know what they went through. And because of a population growth, and this is no disrespect to anybody because that's what we're here for. They had to be moved too for building purposes. And I would rather see that than be built on top of them, or just moved and scattered wherever. And this is just, whoever hears this stays with you. You don't go out and say, oh, I heard Beckee was this, that, and that. That was not to tell you to brag, because that's not my position. It's just that somebody needed to hear that.
Yes, yes.
And then I'm also, as you saw, I'm a potter, a storyteller. I make the reed baskets, and I also now in the process of being engrossed is the word I guess I can say, is making long leaf pine needle baskets.
Oh.
Actually taught a class yesterday of some of our Catawba family members. And then later on that afternoon, went to drum and dance practice for our festival. So yes, and thank you for advertising that it will be November the 23rd this year. And our festival is a celebration of our Catawba heritage. Don't come expecting to see a powwow. That's not what it is. It's strictly talking about our culture. And Keith Brown will be there again this year doing storytelling.
Oh, it's good.
Yeah, he is fabulous. Now, he really does sound like an Indian. But he was been in the military, so he's been all over the world. So he's got his own personal. And I adore Keith. So not just because he's my cousin, but I mean, he's really a true cousin.
Oh,
Yeah.
and the food was wonderful.
Yeah. Especially the roasted corn, and like you say, the fry bread. I didn't even get any. They ran out before I could get there.
Yep, the roasted corn was free too, folks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can open it for discussion if anybody has any questions. And Beckee, feel free if there's anything else you wanted to say, but
yeah.
Well, what questions or thoughts do you have?
Yeah. Well, like once again, I want to thank you for allowing me. And when I say allow, that means inviting me. So.
Oh, thank you for accepting our invitation.
But also, I am was a sibling of 9. My mother was one of 11, and my grandmother, who is the daughter of Chief Samuel Taylor Ballou, was one of 12.
Wow.
And I'm one of 3, so I did not want.
Yes.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
My husband's heritage goes back to Cherokee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also recently I just learned, even though for some reason when I was in the 9th grade and they were talking about Pocahontas, I raised my hand and I told the teacher, I said, well, she was my great grandmother. She was not. But for some reason I just felt it. But just like I say, doing the genealogy, I am a 7th generation Pamunkey as well. And that was the tribe she came from.
I had a question, Beckee, if you don't mind. What
I do,
are
I won't answer.
what are the
I'm sorry, I over to go ahead.
I'm curious about the relations or interaction between the Catawba people and the Cherokee and the Lumbee and other indigenous tribes that are in the area.
Even before contact, we didn't always get along. And after contact, contact with the Europeans, they split us even more because
Mhm.
depending on which side that the different tribes were supported by, they helped instigate the fighting more.
Oh yeah.
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 And so nowadays, it's still that
Yeah.
love-hate relationship,
Yeah. Divide and conquer.
divide and conquer, because of federal regulations and laws. Many of us lost our culture and heritage because it was against the law.
Mm.
Right.
Even in the boarding schools, when they came and took the kids away from their families as young as 3 years old, and and they would send them to these boarding schools, and then they were punished if they spoke the language.
Oh wow.
They were either starved, or they were either put in isolation, or they were beaten.
So you didn't have a choice to let your child go? They just took them?
They just took them. If they didn't, at that time, a lot of them, natives, were put on reservations, and so they didn't have any way of surviving without
The community.
the government bringing them food.
Oh.
So if they didn't give the children up, they withheld the food.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah. We actually have a Catawba child that's buried at Carlisle in a boarding school.
That's awful.
We worked on that for 15 years to get him back. When we were finally in the works of getting him back, there were some tribal members that went up there to bring his remains back. And whenever they removed the remains, even though it was his grave marker, and he was one of the few that actually had markers, turned out to be a 15-year-old girl.
Oh.
And it's my personal belief, without ever being able to prove it, is that he's there.
Mm-hmm.
She was just buried on top of him whenever
Mm.
they moved bodies of the children, when they built that military museum
Mm-hmm.
without any paperwork. And so they don't know who she is. So we can't get permission from her tribal people or family to remove her again, or to send her back home. But I'm thinking there may be at least one other child in there too, in between her and Wade. So we'll never be able to bring his remains back now.
So they never reunited the children with the parents? They just stayed there by themselves?
If the children survived to become 18, they were allowed to go back home, and they weren't taught. They were taught English, learned how to read and write, but they were actually taught how to be domestic help. So they were hired out.
Oh my Lord.
By either the church or the organization that was running the school.
Doesn't it sound like slavery?
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Legal. They didn't call it slavery then, but it's like you say, it's legal.
It's the same thing. It's the
same thing. Yeah.
They took the children away from the parents, and you scared them, and whatever you did, you abused them.
Yeah.
And then they have no connection, and you took all their knowledge that they did have and put your knowledge into them.
Yeah.
And scared them to say, hey, don't you speak that language, you speak this language.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's not your name, this is your name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other questions?
Wow.
I don't have a question, but I just have a comment, and I think a lot of folks share the sentiment, is I will never understand I've just never been able to wrap my mind around how you can just decenter someone's humanity in such a radical way. But I also love that comeback that you said, to that woman. I even in the comment because it was just so powerful and it really resonated with me because I think that all of us can resonate in some way, even if we aren't, like Indigenous Americans. In some way, we all have felt like our identities were questions in some way, and your comeback of, well, how could I disrespect God by not being the person they made me to be?
Yeah.
Like, I want that on a t-shirt. That's just
know.
so
Yes.
Well,
to the
you're welcome
point.
to it. I don't have any.
and
I don't have any.
perfect because I
copyright on it.
Yes,
definitely
I love it.
like, I mean, I
Yes.
am LGBTQ, and there are so many people in this world who tell me that I'm an abomination,
Mm.
and
No,
I don't believe that.
no, you're not.
God made me who I am. So how could I
An abomination.
live my life inauthentically, because that would be disrespecting
Yeah.
my creator.
Well,
So that so resonated with me.
okay, I'll look at it this way too. If you believe God created us all, he created us all.
Mm-hmm.
If you believe in genetics, we all start out the same fertilized egg.
Mm-hmm.
How it divides depends on what your mind tells you who you are. So
Mm.
either way, you're created.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's
So
right.
you're not a disability.
Mm-hmm.
You are an ability
Mm-hmm.
to be you.
I love that.
I do too. I have a quick question. I hope it's quick. Help me put into historical context when the Trail of Tears were taking place. Where was the Catawba Nation?
Right where we are now. Our tribe had gotten so small by then,
Mm.
had taken everything we had
Mm.
already, we didn't have to go. Even though there were some Catawbas on the Trail of Tears, but that was because they had been married into the Cherokee. There were even non-natives that were on the Trail of Tears because they believed in what they were doing. But how many of you know there were actually 3 removals of the Cherokees? That the Trail of Tears was the very last one removed.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the few Catawba that were here, they weren't, what's the word, involved in it. They were kind of just left alone.
When what I didn't tell you was, when Eisenhower was president in his last term, he did the Termination Act, which was he took federal recognition away from 110 of the tribes, meaning they were no longer recognized as being viable anymore. The original treaty we had was in 1730, and believe it or not, it was with the King of England.
Hmm.
He gave us 144,000 miles square.
Wow.
You notice of land, and we were all the way from what you would consider the Florida line, state line, into Georgia, Alabama, up into Virginia, West Virginia, and at times we went all the way as far as up into Canada.
Hmm.
But then we came back at different times, and when he did the Termination Act, that 144,000 acres went away, and we were left with a 1 square mile state reservation because we were put on that first. To get federal recognition back then, you had to have proved that you've been on a state recognized reservation for at least 100 years. To get South Carolina recognition as a tribe, you only have to prove you've been in the same location for at least 100 years. The Catawba were the only tribe that was ever put on a reservation. And I'm not disrespecting them whatsoever because, you know, but we had to fight for 33 years to get our federal recognition back, and we finally got it back in 93. But to enlarge our reservation, we had to buy our land back. And so now we're up to a little over 2,300 acres.
That's not right.
But, and I also had somebody ask me one time, well, why is it called Indian land? And I said, because it's Indian land.
Man.
Oh.
Like,
Yeah.
'cause it's Indian land.
Yep.
And
Well, thank you.
the questions that the people ask you, so ignorant.
I won't call it ignorance. I'm
What
just,
is that? I mean,
it's unknowing.
that's
So
ignorant.
Yeah, well, yeah, you can call it ignorant.
That's ignorant.
Uneducated, yeah, that is.
Uneducated, all of that. You don't.
But most people get what an Indian is supposed to look like, what they're supposed to sound like
Yeah,
from movies.
yeah, and in school,
Yeah.
in school.
Oh, you know, in all the Westerns, and we've got our native people now, you know, wearing the bandana.
Yeah,
Okay, those weren't real Indians that were wearing, that was on makeup, and they had to put the
Yeah.
bandana around the head to hold the wig on.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
well,
goodness, my
we can
goodness.
continue talking.
Yeah.
Let's have our closing and then we can sit and talk for as long as Beckee has time.